Hello, it's Jonathan at the piano lesson once again. It's been about a week. Time flies in the summer. It's been hot, but dry, so it hasn't been too bad. It's been about 95 out here, 95 Fahrenheit for my European friends. So that would be about 35 Celsius. And it's about 30 degrees cooler at the coast, 65 Fahrenheit, which is about 18 Celsius. Isn't that interesting? If I reduce Fahrenheit by about a third, it reduces the Celsius by about a half. Curious. There must be an interesting mathematical proportion there somewhere, which I've never explored. But in any case, and if anyone has good advice for growing tomatoes, please let me know because I'm learning as I go. But it's getting close to my gig on the 23rd of September, 23rd of August, from 7 to 10 at Conway's House of Jazz. The house is actually made of jazz, which is unlike any other house. It's a bit drafty, but it's a good, no, it's actually a very lovely place. It's an unusual place. It's very intimate, and it does attract people who genuinely are interested in music. Isn't that interesting? And a lot of people who simply just want to play. You know, there are. I'll just talk about that for a minute. At Conway's House of Jazz hosts really good players. I mean, there's really good players in Portland, Oregon, and they're there on a regular basis. But also, there are really good amateurs as well, and people who just love to sit in. And it's a very inviting place, very loose environment. There's a woman who's a brilliant tap dancer, she's an unbelievable tap dancer. She comes by every now and again. And I was there last Friday, as I typically am, just kind of sitting in, and I'll post some of those. I'll try to post that for anyone who might be interested in listening to what went on. I did meet an interesting woman there who came up to sing a song. Sophia von Trapp. Sophia von Trapp from the von Trapp family, which, if you don't know, the Sound of Music was based on the story of the von Trapps escaping the Nazis. And I guess it was her grandfather, she told me, he has a resort up in Vermont, which a friend of mine was playing at for many years. And some famous people in the audience as well. We had Thomas Lauderdale, the otherwise known as Pink Martini, who was there. They were there together. So it was kind of fun. And also, I thought I'd talk a little bit about today. How do you go around schlepping around music? You know, I mean, I'm a big advocate of memorizing stuff, but you can't memorize everything. And so I thought I'd share a little of that with you. What are some of the best ways to, organize your music? Well, I'm going to show you right now, and this will date me, but this is my computer. This is my filing system. Okay, this is the desk file sorter. Okay, and you can see here it's all kind of alphabetized. And it's really an accordion. Like the whole thing opens up like an accordion. So you could make this thing, enormously tall if you want. But this thing, I've had this type of organization now for, decades and decades. And I used to play in what we used to call in New Jersey as a club date band. And so one night we'd be a country western band, and the next night we'd be a jazz band. Next night would be a top 40 band. Is that a thing anymore? Top 40? I don't know. But that was what I carried my music in. But now I'm so out of the loop. But a guy mentioned something called iReal or iReal Pro. So essentially, it's something that you could have on a tablet, or your phone. And this particular program, this is an Android program. You might be familiar with it or not, but I have about 2,200 songs that I've downloaded in it, standard songs, and there's a list of songs, and I click on a song, and there's like a whole list of songs that come on, and then if I just I could search for a title, or I could just scroll through it. But like here's a tune, Night in Tunisia. So A Night in Tunisia comes up on the phone. Just pick that, and on the bottom there's some controls that allow you. Oh, it looks like it went back. Let's see. A Night in Tunisia. I keep thinking A Night in Tuna Fish, but okay, that would be awful to be in tuna fish for the night. Okay, but there's some controls down here. There's a D minus sign there if you can see it, but that you could change the key instantly. So if I don't want to play it in D minor, I could click that. It would change the key instantly. If I want to get rid of the controls, I tap on it, and now, whoops, and now the chords take up the entire screen. And that's not bad to go on a gig and go on a jam session or something, and someone wants to play a tune, you don't quite remember it, you want to kind of jog your memory a bit. They're the basic chords, right? I mean, just get you through the gig, but that's pretty interesting. And then I thought, hey, we should really review some of the Tetrachord groups for the people who haven't really experienced those yet. It's always good to keep those in the forefront. So what are tetrachords? Well, I'm sure you already know because I ramble on about those all the time, but the word tetra, T-E-T-R-A, a Greek word meaning four. And these are groups of four notes, and they're typically bound by a perfect fourth. So the word bound, like tying something with a rope. So kind of framed within, contained within, from the distance from the lowest note to the highest note is a perfect fourth. A fourth in general is simply the distance between four letter names in the musical alphabet. So A, B, C, D, but that's a fourth, right? Or B, C, D, E, that's a fourth. That's a fourth going up, or you can get good counting backwards, D, C, B, A, when that's a fourth going down. But a perfect fourth is special because it is what we call what do we call it? Not prime. I'm trying to think of what do we call that? Well, there's fourths, fifths, and octaves. Perfect. Excuse me. Those are perfect intervals, and a perfect interval can be understood as, say, in this case, a perfect fourth. If you take a letter name like A, you say, what's the fourth letter in the major scale? A, B, C, D, that's the fourth letter. What's the fourth letter in an A flat scale? Well, it might be a little harder, but the first one's A flat, B flat, C, D flat. So that's how you determine a perfect fourth. Now, why are those so important? Well, you can create a whole variety of scales with just knowing four tetrachord groups, and those four groups have something in common, and that is two of the notes never change at all when you compare those four groups. The only thing that changes is the notes in between. And when you use two sets of those, you create a scale. It doesn't have to be a major scale, but you can create scales depending on the types of groups that you use. And why would you care about scales? Because if you're going to play music, you need notes. And what notes would those be? Well, they'd be notes of a scale, okay? If you're playing a song in the key of A, then you need the notes of the A major scale. And while there may be exceptions, that's the rule. And likewise, if you're playing in a minor key, let's say, or if you're playing in a mode, which is possible, although less common. It's also useful because it can help us analyze tunes. It can help us get our heads around a piece of music that might not make sense. Music can, in some ways, is a bit of a puzzle, and it's useful to sort of make sense of the music. And it's also useful for memorization because, music can get kind of unwieldy after a while if you're learning all these notes. You can't just learn one note after another after another. No one can remember music that way. Maybe a few people can, but I don't know who. But making it manageable so that when you get to the keyboard, you can grab at groups of notes kind of viscerally, like physically, in kind of an animalistic way. Because, you know, music, when you play music, it's not really that intellectual. It's more like a sport. It's more animalistic, and, you know, you don't have time to think about a whole lot of stuff. So 4 notes, I find, is just the right amount of notes. It's, you know, it's just enough to make sense musically, but it's not too much to be overwhelming. And then there are 2 other categories of tetrachords, which I'll talk about later. Those are not bound by perfect fourths. One is bound by a diminished fourth. So what's a diminished fourth? Well, when you take a perfect interval and you lower it a half step, or an augmented fourth where you raise the note a half step. If you take a perfect interval and you lower it a half step, it's diminished. If you take another kind of interval, a major interval, and lower it a half step, then it's called minor. So that's something different. And if you take a minor interval and lower it a half step, it's called diminished. So that's kind of the hierarchy. So it could be a little confusing, a little tricky. You got to know your perfect intervals. Perfect intervals go back, you know, they're part of the overtone series, they're part of nature, and the ancient Greeks studied them. Ancient instruments and harps used them. So it's pretty cool. So let's just talk about that. Do a nice overview for that. Here's our blank screen. All right. Here's our staff and the good old treble clef. All right. And why am I starting in C? I don't know, because everyone else does. But here's a ledger line: C, D, E, and F. Okay. C, D, E, F. So that is the first 4 notes of the C major scale. And I'm going to talk about the major tetrachords first. So actually, I'm going to move this over here. All right, move this over here a little bit. That is the first tetrachord group. That's a major tetra, C-H-O-R-D. And the next group, after C, D, E, F, we're going to do G. Sorry, that's not G. Okay. There's your F. Okay. And then G, A, B, C. Just seeing if you're paying attention, right? there's the next tetrachord group, G, A, B, C. Okay. And all together, that constitutes a major scale, right? Now, even though the notes here are different than the notes here, the letter names of the notes, they have something in common, and that's the intervals, I-N-T-E-R-V-A-L, or plural S, right? Those are the intervals, the distance between the notes. Why are they similar? Because the distance from E and F is a half step, and the distance from B and C is a half step. That's a half step. All right. The other intervals are whole steps. So what's a whole step? Well, 2 halves make a whole. So this is C to D is a whole step, and D to E is a whole step. So the pattern is whole, W, whole, half, H. Yeah, and of course the English word whole, W-H-O-L-E, we spell it that way. If you don't have the W, well, then it's a hole in the ground, right? For people who may just want to be curious, but that's why W-W-H, whole, whole, half, whole, whole, half. And in between, we're not really discussing that interval, but the distance where those tetrachords are adjacent, where they're what we call D-I-S, J-U-N-C-T, disjunct, dis meaning not, they're not sharing the same note. There are some tetrachord groups, some scales that share a note. Those are called conjunct. These are disjunct. That distance is a whole step. That's a whole step there. But we're not going to worry about that so much. So the first tetrachord and the second tetrachord. Right? That is our major scale. And how many major scales are there? Well, there's 12. And why are there 12? Because you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 possibilities of where you can make a scale. But the logical way to proceed is to, if you're learning scales, the logical way to proceed is to realize that each tetrachord group has more than one function. The C, D, E, F is the first four notes of the C scale, but it is also the last four notes of the F scale. It does two jobs. And likewise, G, A, B, C, that's the last four notes of the C scale, but it's also the first four notes of the G scale. So by learning the C scale, by learning one scale, you are in effect learning half of two other major scales. So you should realize that you're doing more than one thing. You're actually learning more than one thing. All right, let's keep going. Just wanted to emphasize that. All right, so what am I saying here? I'll kind of make a bigger staff, and just kind of bear with me with my little whiteboard, but I just feel more comfortable using this. So I'm going to start here. F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Right? F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So that's one tetrachord group, two tetrachord groups, and the third tetrachord group. Okay, so again, this distance from here to here, that's the C major. That's the C major scale. G, A, B, C is the first four notes of the G scale. F, G, A, B flat is an F scale altogether. That's your F scale. Now, why is there a B flat? Well, because if we're going to maintain the interval relationships, all of these groups have to have a half step. There has to be a half step here, there has to be a half step here, there has to be a half step here. And that's why we don't play B natural. That's why in the key of F, there is a B flat. There's one flat. Right? So if you were to practice your scales, it's always better to do it in that order, which is the circle of fifths, right? So F up to C, F, G, A, B, C, that's a fifth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. C, D, E, F, G, that's a fifth, right? What's the next tetrachord group? Well, G, A, B, C, D, kind of getting into the ledger lines there, but a D, it would be the next tetrachord group. D, E, F sharp, G. That's the next group. So if I'll rewrite this. So we'll look at it. We'll construct the G scale. Right? C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. All right. So again, there's our tetrachord: C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. There's the C major scale. Here is the G major scale, and being that we need a half, we have to have a half step here. We have to have a half step here. That's already there. And then we have another half step here. So we're going to make an F sharp, G. G, we'll write it down here, it's a little clearer. G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. That is the G major scale. Right? That's the G major scale. So just to prove my point that, again, by learning the C scale, you are in fact learning half of two other scales, the major tetrachord. And you would proceed in that order. The next logical scale would be D, D, E, F sharp, G, and then you go up the next note, A, B, C sharp, D, and there's the sharp. So the key of D has two sharps. And that's why the scales are constructed the way they are. You know, we talk about there being 12 different major scales, and by the way, remember 3 of those can be spelled in more than one way. Those are our enharmonic spellings. But it's really one big idea that is all interconnected. And I kind of liken it to standing on the top of a mountain looking at a panoramic view, sort of turning around 360 degrees. I was going to say 365 degrees, but that's the days of the year. 365 and a quarter degrees, okay. But 360 degrees, kind of turning around. It's one big idea, all right? It's a fabric, as opposed to lots of little notes that are stuck together that you have to memorize. Now, let's keep going. That was the first type of tetrachord. There's 3 others. What are the 3 others, and why do you care? Well, probably the next one you really want to know is the minor tetrachord. So if you're going to learn a minor tetrachord, well, we're going to need to, we'll go back to our C scale, and you're going to need to change E to E flat. Right? You're going to have to put an E flat there. You're going to have to lower that a half step. This interval here, that was formerly a major third, now it is a minor third. Right? If you take a major interval, C to E, and you lower it a half step, it becomes minor. So that's the minor part of it. And then G, A, B, C. Now, that's a major tetrachord. That's the G major. It's a G major tetrachord. Here's what it sounds like. Right? That is the melodic, M-E-L-O-D-I-C, the melodic minor. And melodic minor is pretty darn important. And, you know, for some reason, it's the least understood of all the minor scales, and kind of it's learned last, but you should really learn it first. You know, you should learn the melodic minor first, because it's only one note different than the major. That's it, right? Take any major scale, lower the third, and you get lower the third note in the scale, the third degree, half step, and now you have a melodic minor scale. But keep in mind, we typically only play that going up, ascending, and there's a very practical reason why we do that. We do that because if we don't change the scale descending, it's going to sound major. It's going to sound like a major scale. So I'll get to that. But that's a pretty easy scale. So now that's the second tetrachord group, the minor tetrachord. Okay, all right, we'll go back. So this is your minor tetrachord, and this is your major tetrachord group, right? And you stick those together, and that's the melodic minor scale. Now, there are 3 minor scales, the melodic being one of them, and all 3 scales have the same lower tetrachord group in common. They have the exact same notes in common. So C, D, E flat, F. That tetrachord group, that minor tetrachord group, is going to be useful for all 3 minor scales. Here's the melodic, G, A, B, C, right? If I want to make that into a natural minor, natural, N-A-T-U-R, a natural minor, well, then I'm going to lower the A to A flat and the B to the B flat. So now in the minor tetrachord, you have the half step here between 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, we have between excuse me, between 2 and 3. That's what I meant to say. They're between 2 and 3. Here you have the half step between 1 and 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. And the major tetrachord, where was that? It was between 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the major, the half step, is between 3 and 4. The minor is between 2 and 3. Remember, these outer notes stay the same, just the middle note changes. That's the, right? And together, all of that together would be a natural minor scale. Right? So when would you use that? Well, remember I said that melodic minor, we only use ascending. So descending, you'd use the natural minor. Now, here's a little sidebar. Why, oh, I'm running out of time. Wow, I got a bit hurry. Why do we use, why do we call it natural? Well, we call it natural because the natural minor scale shares its notes with its relative. So what is a relative? Well, a relative, it's not an aunt or an uncle. It's another scale. It's a mode of that scale. It's kind of reframed. So in this case, the C minor scale, if you go up 3 notes, up a minor third, the relative major is E flat. And they both share the exact same notes. Nothing's been changed. And that's what the word natural refers to. Even though the scale has flats in it, has accidentals, nothing's been changed. That's what the word natural means, as opposed to an accidental, which is something that's not in the key signature. And then the last one, I'll just do quickly, and then I got to run real fast, is the harmonic minor. So this is going to be a B natural, and right, and that scale, your half step is here and here. So there's 2 half steps, and that scale, if you're playing in a minor key, those are the notes that you want. Okay, that's it. I got to run. Have a great week, and drop me a line. This is Jonathan at The Piano Lesson. Visit www.thepianolesson.com. See you later.